Hey, I am Ryan Naylor, the host of the podcast, all aimed at helping small business owners. In fact, I just got this cool cup, the Built to Grow podcast mug. Finally got it, ordered it like 3 months ago. We'll have to give you one, Devon. But we've got some awesome guests. We've been talking a lot about. We've had a couple NFL athletes on recently talking about kind of the transition from kind of playing the grind of football, but how it's really cultivated and helped with work ethic, leadership, and in transitioning to be an entrepreneur. And excited to have Devon Kennard on here again. Talk to us about kind of his experience. 9 years in the NFL, is that right?
Yep, 9 years.
All right. Well, I'm going to hit you with a hard question up front, if that's all right.
Go for it.
Reflecting on those years, gosh, you had from the Giants to the Lions, the Cardinals, a little bit in Baltimore. You played with some iconic individuals. You yourself, iconic. But let's think about who is one person that demonstrated the best leadership skills for you.
For me, I'll probably have to go Matthew Stafford. He became a pretty good friend of mine when I played in Detroit, but just seeing the level of humility, but how he approached work every day, that was pretty awesome. And being that high caliber of a player, and he's a guy you'd love to like grab a beer with and just hang out. So he really cultivated the locker room in a positive way by just being one of the guys.
What was it someone like he did that others didn't? What was that gap like that he kind of was able to rise above, where I wouldn't even say, like, you're in the NFL, I wouldn't even say mediocre players, but like they used to call this the greatness gap. What is it that created that gap?
I think it goes back to he just really kind of felt like one of the guys, like the superstar player, they kind of can isolate themselves intentionally or unintentionally. But I just felt like Matthew never really did that. And even to this day, I don't think he carries himself that way. I tell all my buddies I grew up with here in Phoenix, like, it's like he's a guy that could be sitting right here next to us, just kicking it, watching Sunday football if he wasn't playing, obviously. Very relatable, but also, he gets on that field and he's an ultimate competitor. He can talk a little crap with the best of them. And I feel like just a guy's guy that you could really relate to.
Oh, it's amazing. That goes so far with anyone, right? Just being humble, just being approachable, just being one of the guys. There's a lot of leadership lessons learned in there too. As a CEO or a business leader, how often we forget to just be one of the guys and kind of be able to talk to people at their level, meet them where they are, right?
I think that's so true. I mean, that's how, obviously to my own scale, I was never Matthew Stafford, but I feel like that's how I approach my life. That's how I approach my business. Not afraid to get your hands dirty, not afraid to talk and interact and deal with people. Don't try to carry yourself higher than anyone else. Being the guy that talks to the top guy all the way down to the janitor walking through, those kind of principles and concepts go a long way and transition well into, business world for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's talk about that transition into the business world just a little bit. So you're in 9-10 years in the NFL, obviously great career at USC, but tell me a little bit, like, when did it click football wasn't the ultimate plan? When was that realization? What point of your career were you like, there's got to be something more here?
For me, I feel like it was always kind of ingrained in me for two reasons. One, my dad played in the NFL as well. He played 13 years. And I got to see him mostly post-career. So I got a really good insight of, like, even if football goes as well as you can ask it, my dad played 13 years. He won a Super Bowl with the Dallas Cowboys, all this thing. There's still so much life after. So I always had that concept of, like, I got to make sure I put myself in position to where I have a good life once I'm done. And it kind of really slapped me in the face my senior year of high school and most of my collegiate career, because I was a top recruit. I was the number one recruit in the nation coming out of high school, and then tore my ACL. And then I'm in college and I faced a ton of adversity, coaching changes, position changes, injuries, being a 5-star recruit, number one guy out of the state of Arizona, top guy in the entire nation, to not looking like I'm going to make it to the NFL at all. It made me ask myself hard questions and the biggest one was, do I want to be successful because of football, or do I want to be successful, period? And I kind of really asked myself that question, and I came to the realization I have a vision of success and what I want my life to look like. And I always saw myself getting it through the game of football. But if I wasn't going to get it through football, I still wanted it regardless. And once I made that decision, it's like, okay, I have to figure out what life looks like for me off the field. And I really kind of dove into networking and figuring out what I wanted to do. And I gravitated towards first real estate, very niche. And then now real estate's still my specialty, but I really kind of understood now that like real estate is just a form of business. And it's like, a balance sheet is a balance sheet, a P&L is a P&L, and so on. So understanding where real estate fits within the business world. And now I consider myself, a business person, not a real estate guy necessarily, because I can geek out over CAC and LTV and monthly growth and net profit margins and all those things. But it doesn't matter whether it's, a real estate property or an operating business, that, all those things still apply.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There's some stats floating around. I don't know how true they are. Maybe something to the effect of north of 70% of most professional athletes are broke within just a few years after they retire. What did you see up close and personal in your experience with these athletes, and why do you think so many NFL players do go broke?
I wish they would rerun those numbers, because I wonder what it is now. Those projections were years ago, and I think it is true, and I think it's prevalent now too, but I don't know if those exact numbers are what I saw throughout my career and towards the end, and then still being connected with a lot of guys still playing. Guys are starting to invest more now than ever before. When I first got in the league, it was just like stock market and stuff. What concerns me is guys don't know how to underwrite and assess risk and understand business. And they have a lot of money and they're getting pitched business opportunities, but don't understand asset allocation and a balanced portfolio. And it's easy to get caught up in things that I'm going to invest in this venture capital deal that's supposed to 100x, but not understanding that that money's locked up for 5-10 years and there's no consistent income from that. So while it's sexy and hopefully it does 100x, it might not. And even if it does, there's a long time period where it's illiquid and not giving you any kind of return. So I'm very passionate, and I speak to a lot of NFL players. The NFLPAs hired me on to talk about that specifically, because I don't think players put enough respect on the idea of a balanced portfolio and really having a portion of their capital really allocated towards revenue generating businesses or investments. And it's hard because while you're playing, you're making so much money. So you're not thinking of more income.
Right.
You're thinking of investments that are going to grow. But the problem is you retire and that faucet turns completely off. And even if you made a large sum of money, you're churning that money every month. You're spending 50 grand, 100 grand, and you have no consistent income, and you get put in a position where you're just waiting for the next investment to pay off. And that's a trap that you don't want to be into. Like you're calling your financial advisor, you're calling the operator. Hey, this was supposed to be a 5-year hold and I'm not getting my money back. What's going on? You don't want to be chasing when deals are coming back. But I see that often now because so many guys invest that way.
You become an accredited investor only by basically having money, which blows my mind that there's not anything beyond. Do you have a net worth over a certain dollar amount? But the understanding of liquid versus non-liquid investments, especially if your career is cut a little short, right? I mean, anything can happen anytime. And we're not even just talking about injury, but just talking about from position to be taken because you got the next Heisman that got drafted in your spot. And now you're on the bench. And now you're on practice squad. And before you know it, your contract's gone. And so anyway, it's fascinating to hear that. But Devon, reflect for me for just a little bit. Your first paycheck, what'd you do with it? You got your first big paycheck. Do you remember what you spent it on?
For me, I saved it.
Okay.
Kind of give you context on my background. So
Yeah.
I saved it. There's even a CNBC article where that goes into how, I drove my high school car in the NFL for the first few years of playing. And that actually segued into me getting a free car for a little while. But I drove my 2005 Kia Sorento that I used to drive here in Ahwatukee. I brought that to New York. I was playing for the New York Giants, rolling in a 05 Kia Sorento, and I'm seeing Rolls Royces and Mercedes. And I had a good idea of the concept of delayed gratification. So it's not that I didn't want nicer things, but I got a reality early on of how football can be taken away from me. So it was like, I'm going to save as much of this money and give myself a head start on life after ball. And, so my first few years, I really didn't spend any money. I didn't buy my first car or do anything crazy until I got my second contract. The one thing I did do, which was kind of crazy, is my first off season, we had rookie dinner. So I ended up spending way more money because all the vets made me spend money there. And then I took some of my buddies to Miami after my rookie season and got a tough reality of you go to Miami with a bunch of people and you're the only one with money, it gets expensive really quick. So I would say those are my big splurges of rookie dinner. And then, but I don't regret either of them, but it was just one of those things. You got to do what you got to do.
I love that. Good for you on having your head on straight. Kind of people get a little taste of money and they go a little crazy on depreciating assets, right? And I think that's probably an important thing. In fact, you see that a lot even in the small business community. You see a small business owner get out there, win a big contract, start getting a little bit of success, and next thing you know, they're at the credit union signing a long-term loan on a vehicle that's depreciating faster than their payments. And after a few years, and they want to do a trade-in, a little upgrade, and they're shocked that they now owe more money to get rid of it.
I think the conversation around that needs to be different though, because a lot of people, there's people who just want those nicer things. And that's okay. How you get them and when you get them matter though. So I think the conversation of like, oh, you should live frugal and all this, I think it cuts a lot of people off because you're a business owner and you come into a good amount of money or you're killing it. And, you just crossed your first $1 million year or month or whatever. And the financial gurus are telling you, save all your money, don't spend, and it's like, bro, I feel like it's unrealistic. And I've seen that in the sports world. So, I think the conversation around that needs to change. I always say, pick one or two vices that you have. What are the things that you like to spend money on? We talked a little off camera. You like to travel with your family.
Yeah.
That's great. You just don't want to be the guy who likes to travel with his family, who wants a crazy house, multiple cars. Oh, you like to go out and party. Like it gets dangerous when you're adding vice after vice after vice. But if you have one thing that you like to splurge on, that you like to spend money on, you can do that one thing. But the issue is when you're trying to do all of these things all at once, you're breaking the rule of compounding. And I always say earn, invest, and then spend the excess capital from there.
For all those people listening, in fact, this show gets listened to by quite a few high school kids. And I want to go back to the old high school days of Devon, the glory days in high school. I want to talk about that in a minute. But for that individual that's coming out of high school, college, business school, they get their first $10,000 pop. They got a little extra cash in the checking account. What do they do with it? How do they invest it? Where should they put their money? Do you have some insights, some thoughts around the best way to make that 10,000 turn into 15 or 20,000?
I would say if they're that young, the best way to spend your money is on your own education.
Yeah.
Taking a course to learn something you're interested about, going to some kind of mastermind. Obviously got to be careful. Some of them are crappy out there, but do your best to try to pick a good one. But investing in yourself, especially when you're young, is the best investment. I mean, putting $10,000 into anything isn't necessarily going to change your life anytime soon. But putting $10,000 into your own education, into a skill that can add value, that can really contribute to you, I think that's the best investment you can make. So I think the younger you are, the more you need to be investing in yourself first. And I think that trickles down all the way to when you get older. Even now, you need to be investing in yourself, whether it's money or time, what have you. But, young people always ask, I mean, if you got $5,000, sure, I could say put it in the stock market or this and that. But I think the best investment you can make is what can I buy that's going to teach me a skill that I need to learn? Can I learn sales? Can I learn how to integrate AI into companies? Can I learn a certain skill that's going to add value that increases my earning potential? So I spend this $5,000 here, but it puts me in a position where I can earn $100,000 6 months from now or a year from now.
That was spot on, dude. That was absolute bullseye advice because, I've asked this question a handful of times and you're right. My big personal philosophy is the power of compound, and you can't compound that $10,000 as fast as you can compound your own personal contribution factor, meaning what can I learn to contribute more to generate more value for someone else? And that's where you really get the compound effect, is when you can continue to get more education, more value, niche down, have a skill set worth paying for. And sometimes you got to invest into that. So I love that answer. That's fantastic. Let's stay on that path here. I got a couple questions for you specifically about kind of any financial advice, maybe in the NFL or even post NFL. Were there any kind of money beliefs that you had to unlearn before you actually saw yourself being successful?
The best way to invest is having a financial advisor and giving your money to somebody to help you. Not that you can't or shouldn't ever have a financial advisor. I'm not saying that. There's some great ones out there, but you need to control your own money and understand everything that you're investing in. There's nobody who cares about your money more than you. And I would say early on, I felt like, I don't know anything about this, so I'm just going to find a financial advisor, hire them, and let them do their thing. They don't care about your money like you do. They don't understand your goals. And I started to see that because I started to build my own thesis that I'm very cash flow forward. So many people focus on appreciation and growth and stuff. And for long term and having that, retirement type of money, that's great. But you need a certain level of cash flow to sustain your life, to make sure you can reinvest. And I'm like, if I focus on the cash flow, now I have enough money to spend, but I also have enough money to find new things to invest. But you run out of capital eventually. Even if you make a ton, like you come into $10 million and all you invest is in things that don't cash flow, you run out of money eventually, even with $10 million. And I started to see with financial advisors, they didn't really have a solution for that. And I'm like, I get into my NFL career and I'm like, I see the writing on the wall. I'm probably going to be retiring in a couple of years. I want to make sure I have enough income coming in to offset my life expenses and to make sure I'm able to continue to make new investments with new money coming in. Otherwise, I'm just going to be able to invest the money that I have, and then I got to wait. As I was talking to more and more different financial advisors, it's more like stock market, private equity, this or that, which are all good vehicles. But I'm like, what's going to help me generate income? And a lot of them didn't have solutions for that. And that was where I kind of went down the rabbit hole of like understanding your own investment thesis and creating that for yourself and making sure your financial plan aligns with that, with those goals. And even if you do have a financial advisor, they're a piece in helping that come into creation, but you are the controller of it all.
I can hear the passion here. I love it so much because your passion around wealth, not just creation, but wealth stability, right? People have their honeypot. And don't draw from the honeypot. Let the honeypot generate wealth, distributions, annuities that can then pay for your lifestyle without tapping the principal. And I think that's a concept a lot of people don't understand is the power of retaining that and leverage. How do you leverage that to generate more wealth on the backside that you live within those guardrails, right?
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing today. Maybe for those that have never heard about private money or hard money lending, can you explain it to me like I'm brand new?
I guess I'll start with kind of my background. So first, I started buying single family properties. I purchased up to 50 properties on my own. A lot of them I paid cash. I was buying in the Midwest. Hindsight, I wish I kind of started buying in Arizona instead at the time, but it was expensive and I was early in my career in the NFL and figuring it out. So I was buying in the Midwest, buying around $100,000 and I was charging like $1,400 in rent. So if you're in that world, that's, the 1% rule. It was exceeding that really well. It was cash flowing great. I was doing that for a long time. And then I started investing in syndications and funds, mostly real estate backs, so it's a large apartment building. They're raising money from high net worth individuals like myself while I was playing to do the project. And I invested in a ton of those. I ended up having over 50 investments in syndication deals, apartments. I tried to diversify throughout the country, all of that. And through that experience of owning a bunch of real estate, I had stock market investments. I was investing in a lot of syndications and funds. And I started to see like none of them were accomplishing everything that I wanted towards the end of my career. I wrote a couple of books for any of the audience out there that's familiar with like Bigger Pockets. They published my books. I'm a contributor there. And I started to build a network and a couple of people started asking like, I know you have some capital. Would you lend to me on a project? And I was like, oh, you know what? I'll give this a try. I had no idea what I was doing from the start. So they're buying a property for cheap, renovating it, selling it for way more. And there's essentially people who provide them money for doing that. They don't like going to banks because banks move too slow and are way too rigorous. So they pay a premium to someone like myself who can give them money quickly, allow them to do the project, get out of it, and they're willing to pay a premium on the interest rate because it's short term and their plan is to exit and sell for a significant profit. So I did that a couple of times, just kind of not fully understanding what I was doing, but kind of hand holding my way through. But where I had an advantage is I already understood real estate and I understood how to underwrite a borrower and to underwrite a deal. Like, okay, this makes sense. I was playing for the Cardinals and I'm like, all right, I know I'm probably going to be retiring in the next year or two. I started looking at the stock market, my portfolio there, my residential real estate portfolio, all my syndications and funds. And then these couple of deals I did. And I was like, on a cash flow basis, there's nothing that's generating me this kind of cash flow. And the turnover is so quick. So, it's
What's
a
the
year
window typically. Yeah, is that a year?
All my loans are a year, but like right now, the average loan that I fund lasts about 7.5 months.
Okay.
So why that's advantageous for me from a business perspective is I call it churn rate. My churn rate is high. So I'm able to fund like 1.6 deals per year, 1.6 to 1.8 deals per year. And there's fees every time I fund a deal. So not only am I charging interest, which is what's annualized, but if I'm funding 2 deals every year on that same dollars, I'm able to charge fees twice on that first time I funded and the second time, which compound my return. So once I started to see that, because I've invested in a couple of debt funds, but the problem there is I only invest my money. So I have $100,000. I put it in a debt fund. They pay me 9%. Running my own business doing it, now I get to use my own money. I get to use line of credits on that real estate portfolio I told you about. So, I bought mostly cash, have line of credits on it, take a line of credit. I'm paying the bank 7%, but I'm charging 12%. I get to make the spread. So, arbitraging, my line of credits. And then that brings in investor capital. Oh, I can pay somebody else 9 or 10%. And, they're happy because they're getting a consistent return. Other players who don't have a cash flow bucket, I've talked a lot about cash flow. Hey, I can pay you 10% annualized. I started to piece this together and just really built it out. And, as of today, I funded over $32 million in loans, and that's all with private capital. And I'm just growing the business.
How do you look at risk on something like this? How do you protect yourself from the fallout of someone not being able to repay you? The project went south. How do you protect yourself?
So the number one is Arizona is a non-judicial foreclosure state. So almost all of my business is here. But what that means with doing non-judicial foreclosure in a non-judicial foreclosure state is that means if a borrower doesn't pay back, I don't have to go through the judicial process, go to court and all this. I can take over a property in 90 days or less. So the quickness of that is a huge advantage. Because I pull payments from borrowers on the first of every month. They don't make the payment on the first. I'm reaching out to them. Hey, you're at risk of default. You need to make sure you get this payment in, what have you. I can start to foreclose that same month. And so within 90 days, I can take over the property and now I own it. So that's one huge advantage is like, it's not a strenuous property. It's a process to take over the property. Number two is I'm lending up to 70% of the ARV and I'm making them put skin in the game and they're making payments along the way. So all of these factors, it's like, okay, if they're buying a property for $500,000 in Mesa and at closing, they put almost $80,000 to $100,000 in. Are they really walking away day one? Is it possible? Sure. Most likely not, because why would you close? You got almost $100,000 in this deal and you're just walking away. You're not going to make payments. I'm taking it over. It's just, unless a crazy event happens in their life, it's just not really happening. So then it's like, okay, the project comes along. I know whether they're performing or not because I have rehab draws. They're sending me pictures and updates and they're making payments. So I'm able to monitor. And if they're not being communicative, if they're not making payments, if there's not progress with the projects, then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's a red flag. What's going on there? So I'm able to kind of every step of the way have a really good idea of what's going on with the project and whether it's performing or not, which is a huge risk mitigation tool. So the combination of all that, I feel like makes it safer to do these type of loans and really understand what's going on.
Those that don't understand this, I think this is fascinating. one of the key metrics in these investment portfolios is your IRR, your internal rate of return. So for every $1 that you're spending over 1 year, how much is that $1 grown? Can you talk a little bit, Devon, on what your IRR typically is lending as opposed to renting? Because I love that you've got experience in both, because there's a lot of real estate gurus out there talking about, go buy and flip a house. Then there's the gurus that are like, go buy a bunch of rental units, put people in. Then you got the Airbnb guys. And I think a lot of it comes down to understanding is risk and IRR.
Yes.
And a lot of times that return on your investment capital, may look really sexy with an Airbnb, but all of a sudden you have a little bit of a tourism drought, or cost of gas goes up like it has been. And all of a sudden those destinational communities that otherwise once were really busy, now they're budget constrained and they're not, as your vacancy goes up. Tell us a little bit about kind of what you look for from an IRR perspective.
So let's talk about the three main ways that there's business professionals in real estate. So there's building a real estate portfolio of properties, there's fix and flipping, and then I'll compare it to lending. Building a real estate portfolio, especially, let's just talk Arizona. We're both in Arizona. Building a real estate portfolio in Arizona, the cash on cash return and total IRR is not very good. The IRR can be good because of appreciation. I don't think it's going to be good these next few years because I feel like it's going to be pretty stable. So you can't count on great appreciation in the Arizona
market. You can't
market.
Control it, right?
Yeah.
It's very outside your
So when you're looking at IRR, you're to juice your IRR with a real estate portfolio, you have to add in great appreciation from the growth of the property's values. That and forced appreciation. So you're buying really cheap and then you renovate it nice and you force appreciation. So if you're forcing appreciation, that's one way to do it. If you're looking for natural appreciation, it's not really there. The big sticking point in Arizona is on a cash flow basis, it's very minimal because you buy a $500,000 house in Mesa, the most you're probably getting rent for it is maybe $3,000. So the math isn't great. So all of your IRR and your return is really based on what you're able to force in appreciation by maybe buying it cheap and renovating it, and what you're able to naturally get from appreciation. So that's the issue in a market like Arizona. If you want to just buy a real estate portfolio, it's not going to cash flow very well in the short or midterm at all. And you're betting on appreciation, which you're going to have to hold for, a long time. So that's the issue there. Now, fix and flipping. I love it. I lend to fix and flippers, but it is a cash restraint business in the sense of they buy a property and they have no cash flow till they sell, and it's big pops. So it's higher risk, higher reward. If they execute well, if they buy right, like that's where I was talking earlier about like having a, understanding the difference between real estate and business. Being a flipper, you're running your own flipping business. That is a business in itself, but the business doesn't have any residual income. So you have to front all of this money and carry the cost for the projected big return in the end. Now,
accrue the debt, the interest,
accrue the debt, the risk, handle payments to someone like me, manage construction crews, do all of this. I'm not knocking the business at all because the return on the back end can be really high, but it's capital intensive and there's a lot of risk in it. So now you compare that. So the IRRs there can be 20% plus, but you have to be able to carry that for the life of that project. And there's a chance that the market turns a little and you're losing money. And if you do enough flips, you're going to lose money on some, or you're going to not make as much. So you have to balance that out across all of the projects you did. So high risk, high reward. Now comparing those two to lending, IRR you asked. So when unlevered, I can make between a 14 to 15% IRR on my capital. But what makes it very impactful to me is it's cash IRR. That's money that's actually hitting the account annually, which means I'm able to compound it. You mentioned compound. So understanding the difference, not all things are true. So let's assume the long-term rental can do a 15% IRR too, but most of that is from appreciation, as opposed to I can hit 15% IRR unlevered, but it's cash flow monthly. Do you look at those the same? Yes or no? That's, to me, I'm like, I value a business that's generating a 15% IRR based on cash flow coming in, and I'm able to reinvest those dollars to get a very similar return. I get a 15% IRR, and that, let's say that nets me $500,000. I'm able to reinvest that $500,000 and make a 15% IRR on that as well. Now in my business, you can talk about levered. So now if I go and raise money, if I go and use my line of credit, so, I track that as well. So unlevered, 14 to 15% IRR, levered 22 to 27% is where I'm going to land this year, for instance. When I stack on just my dollars, what I'm making versus what I can do with investor capital, with the line of credits I'm using, the overall portfolio compared to the dollars that I have in the business, I can generate a mid 25, so let's call it 25% return on that capital. So that's what I think is interesting in that. But the downside is there's no appreciation in that, and there's more of a tax hit for me. So it's give and take. So there's tax benefits in holding the residential. So that's why people are willing to do that. There's big upside in flips. And then in lending, the cash is great, but I don't have any tax benefits. So there's pros and cons in all of them, and you got to just decide your game.
I think it's fascinating. Have you ever done a modified hard money where you're taking a percentage of the pop at the end as well?
I haven't yet, but I'm going to grow into that for sure. Cause it's the same underwriting is what I'm saying. So I can do preferred equity on some deals, on bigger deals. Cause like, for instance, I can't fund everything in Paradise Valley, for instance. Those loans are way too large, but I can come in as a preferred equity position and have it structured kind of like debt, to where it's like, hey, a preferred return of 12%, and I get an equity kicker on the back end of 10% of the profits, so I haven't done any of that yet, but that's just going to juice my returns long term, because I'm like, it's the same borrower type of people. It's the same borrowers, but a different model. So, I'm interested in that in the future as well.
That's awesome. Do you have your own team, or do you do it yourself? How do you do all the underwriting and sourcing deals?
So I have a software system that helps me manage the deal from start to finish. And then I have a servicing manager, a bookkeeper, and a processor. So they're helping me with the whole loan process. And then my wife is a local agent here for Compass. So we handle internal valuations, where we're going out to the properties. We're evaluating what we believe the as is versus after repair value is. And I feel like the combination of all those things is what makes us a unique lender in the marketplace, because have that combination of things. So it's fun. I would say it's a small team. We're able to do a lot of volume, but leveraging software, and then pretty much an admin staff. And then I felt that up to this point, I'm best suited with final underwriting decisions. So they kind of prepare everything, and then I review. And then marketing up front. So bringing in borrowers, leveraging my name, my reputation, going to events, et cetera, investor relations and capital sources, building banking relationships, et cetera. So those are the things that I'm focused on day to day is, originating and marketing, underwriting, and then capital source.
That's fantastic. I love how smart you're thinking about this. You're definitely not a one-stop shop. You got your hands in a lot of different things, which is phenomenal. Can you tell me about, maybe if you're reflecting, what's one that got away? What's one deal, one investment that you're like, looking back, I should have pulled the trigger?
The one thing I'm regretting is I have a lot of money locked up in syndications and funds that I can't touch. And I will do that very little going forward. Not that I won't ever do it again, because there's some great operators that's given me amazing returns and have been awesome. But there's something to be said about having absolutely no control, and you're just waiting. And, some of the multifamily stuff, I don't know how familiar you are, but like interest rates, so deals are just sitting and they're and just having to sit and wait and like, oh, am I getting any of my money back? Am I getting it all back? Okay, I'm going to make a good return on this, but when? So I would say my biggest hindsight, I don't regret it because all that I've learned and all that, but I think about the money that I have in syndications and funds today and what I can do if I were to just take all that money today and bring it into my lending operation. And the fact that I have to wait over the next 2 to 4 years for these things to, go full cycle and recapitalize and get it all back versus if I just took it today. So, again, I don't regret it because overall the portfolio's performed really well of all my syndication funds, but I can't refinance when I want to. I can't take line of like even my residential real estate portfolio, the ones that don't make sense, I'm able to sell, I'm able to refinance. I got line of credits. Like I have optionality of like, all right, how do I want to, play this portfolio? With the syndication stuff, I just got to wait, get updates and wait. So I would say my biggest all I got away is just like, I wish I could have all that money back today.
You like control. You want to hold that money and do it.
Yeah. and yeah, so I think that's for me, somebody who's completely passive, they won't feel the way that I do. But I'm looking at, I just said I can make at least a 14% return on a dollar and levered 22 to 26. So it's like the average syndication is around 15% IRR, but it's once again factoring in all the appreciation and all that. So I'm like, I can generate that myself on cash flow. So that's kind of, now that I know that I would say that's my biggest regret.
All right, I'm going to change gears just a little bit, and I'm going to selfishly talk about your high school life. So I know it's always uncomfortable to go back to those glory days sometimes, but Devon, you were a 5-star athlete. You got recruited by, in my opinion, one of the greatest college football programs in the country at the time at USC, and you had your own setbacks. But can you tell me just a little bit about going back to sophomore, junior year version of Devon? What were you doing to prepare yourself mentally to become an elite athlete? So I'm not talking like just the financial side of it and the career man that you are today, but think about it just becoming a character athlete at the time, what the grind was. What did you have to do to become that 5-star athlete?
I would say the two things that stood out to me when I was that age was, one, my dad and my brother used to always tell me, if you want different results, you can't do what everybody else is doing. You got to go above and beyond. So it's like, all right, you're playing football, for instance, and you do the team workouts and the team lifts. If your goals are different, you can't just stop there. That's what everybody on your team is doing. You got to be putting in extra work. You got to be running extra hills, doing extra sprint work, doing extra position drills. So now I didn't articulate it that way that way at that time. So that's how it was worded, is like, I can't do what everybody else is doing. I have to do above. That's kind of how I conceptualized it at the time. How I would now is there's a difference between what's mandatory and what's necessary. Everybody does what's mandatory. Very few people decide to do what's necessary. And what I mean by that is, like, if you own a company or if you're an employee or whatever, you're a student, you said there's some younger people who listen to this podcast, everyone's going to go to school and do pretty well in school so they can go to college. And like, it's just kind of like you float, like, all right, I'm going to do what I need to do to kind of get through life. And then there's people who does what's necessary to reach the goals that they have. Are you willing to do what's necessary to reach the goals that you have in your life? And if you're going to do what's necessary, you got to go above and beyond what's mandatory. Mandatory is status quo. Necessary is above and beyond. And that's how I would describe what I was kind of instilled in me from my parents and my brother. I have a brother who was like my coach growing up and was the biggest difference maker for me in my life early on, for sure.
You come from an incredible pedigree. You're born with gifts. A lot of us aren't. But that's just not enough in today's day and age either. You mentally had to be tougher. Was there any other ways that you would think about it to become mentally tough, to kind of fight through those obstacles, to be able to... Temptations are tough too in high school days, right? There's parties on Friday nights or your Thursday nights, and you got to be prepared for game nights. How did you mentally get tough and stay grounded?
I was lucky enough again to have parents and a brother that forced it in me, to where, like, in my early years before high school, my older brother would say I was soft at times. Like I was too soft. I needed to toughen up. And he made sure I did get tougher. He would make me wake up early and run sprints. If my dad or my brother saw me talking back crazy to like my mom or something, they'd kind of, make sure I didn't do that again. Like, so they kind of kept me in line in that regard. And like whatever softness I had in me, they kind of like worked out of me, which I hated at the time and in moments, but I'm very appreciative of it now because it prepared me for life. I guess my challenge to parents out there is like, don't be too soft on your kids. Obviously there's lines. I'm not saying do anything crazy, but like,
Sure.
you got to instill a level of toughness, a level of adversity, a level of a standard, and nothing else is going to be accepted, and I feel like that was ingrained in me, little things. And I connected life to sport so much. I still do, to where it's like little things like running through the line when you're running sprints. Like, my brother was my football coach at Desert Vista. And if we didn't run through the line, like, he would make everybody go back. One guy didn't. Everyone's going back. We're all accountable for each other. Like, those are like important lessons that how many people in business now don't run through the line.
Right. Great point.
And so many. And then it also goes back to that comment I made about delayed gratification and doing what's necessary, not mandatory. Is like, I was in high school and there's people drinking and smoking and partying, but again, I had to make sacrifices. I have different goals in them. I can't do everything that everyone else is doing. But with that doesn't mean I can't have a good time. So don't get me wrong. Like, I had fun with my friends. I went to some of the school parties and dances. But I've always felt better about getting my work done first and then really enjoying myself.
Yeah.
What's wrong with society today, but especially the young, is like they're willing to have fun without handling their business first. I can't wrap my head around that. Like, I've always been the type of person that's like, it's so much more enjoyable to let loose and have a drink with your friends and have a good, when it's like, I finished that paper, I did all my homework, I handled my business, I got my extra workout in. I'm going to have a freaking good time this Saturday night, as opposed to like, I know I got a test on Monday, but I hadn't studied and it's Saturday night and I got one more night after this. And I don't feel good in that circumstance. So I think more people should have that in them. And I don't think enough people don't. So my challenge to anyone in youth is like, not to not have fun, but like handle your business, do what's necessary first, and then be a kid from there.
You handled your business. Look at you now. I love it. Good work. Well, Devon, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And I guarantee anyone listening to this has learned an immense amount of just being smart with your money and being intentional. And you had some incredible gold nuggets in there. Real quick, how can people follow along and kind of follow your journey?
Anybody's interested in, connecting with me and stuff, you can find me all over social media at Devon Kennard, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of that. And then my personal website is just my name, devonkennard.com. And if there's any fix and flippers and people in the real estate industry, go to weare42solutions.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Devon. Pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.